The Atlanta Braves need a shortstop, and they cannot be cheap about it. So why not Corey Seager? I'll tell you that and answer more on today's episode of Locked On Braves. So let's get into it.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, and welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta and part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which is now the #1 sports network. So thank you so much for making that happen. I'm your host again, Jake Mastroianni. You can follow me on social media at Shortstop Ball. Check out the podcast there at LockedOn_Braves on X and Locked On Braves on Instagram, where I'm trying to do a better job of posting there. Thank you so much for all those following me over there on Instagram as well, TikTok, Facebook. We're in all the places now, so make sure you check us out on the socials. On the audio side, you can just leave a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. But here on YouTube, if you're watching me live, thanks so much for joining. Or if you're watching the recorded episode, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you hit that thumbs up button. Leave me a comment down below. All of those good things that help us here at Locked On Braves. Thanks so much for making us your first listen of each and every day, being an everydayer of the podcast, commenting, hitting the thumbs up button. I promise it does help us out a ton. And thank you so much for submitting all of the questions into our weekly mailbag episode. A little bit more of a relaxed episode on the week is I'm going to just answer all of your questions that you sent, and you sent almost 30 of them. So we're not going to waste too much more time here. We're going to get right into your questions. And before I do that, though, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the app today. Like I said, almost 30 questions, wide variety of questions as normal. So I'm going to jump right into these so I can try to get to all of them and give them the appropriate time that is needed. First one here from Matt Olson-Burner that just came in. Thank you for being an everydayer, Matt Olson-Burner. Do you expect the Braves to pass any of the tax thresholds? Also, what's the max you would give Ha-Seong Kim both in years and AAV-wise? And lastly, can you provide some of the names for the bats that you'd like? I'm only going to answer 2 of those. So the first one is, yes, I do expect them to pass at least the first tax threshold. And look, if you're going to pass the first one, you might as well pass the second one, right? It's really that third one where it starts affecting your draft. And we've seen them go up to that limit in the past. Here's something to consider, though. The team payroll right now is higher than your luxury tax payroll. And Alex has said in the past, he really just focuses on the team payroll. We don't know what that number is, but that it does make things a little uncomfortable because they could have a higher team payroll than they do a luxury tax payroll. So they might not hit that threshold because their team payroll might already be at its limit. So look, I think they can spend into the threshold, and I really hope that they do. But it might not be as important to look at that luxury tax threshold this year just because the team payroll is higher, and that's typically the number that AA goes off of. And what is the max I would give Ha-Seong Kim and AAV in years? The max I would go is $20 million a year. Max years I would want to go is 3. And I think that probably is the max that I would go, would be 3 years. 3 years, 20 million, 3 for 60. A lot of projections out there are saying that it's going to be less. You asked to name, some of the bats that I like. I talked about that in last week's episode. The main one that I like is Cody Bellinger in terms of free agents. Next question from AAWX, who says, I think we just got bench coach and third base left to fill. Who would you like to see fill those roles? So be quite honest, I watch a lot of baseball, I watch a lot of teams. I don't really keep track of third base coaches and bench coaches. So I don't have a great range of who I like or who's available. I only really know guys who have been in the Braves organization in the past. Obviously, EY comes to mind as somebody that could be on a track to be a coach. So whether you put him in the third base role or a bench role, I think could make some sense. I will say this, one of those 2 spots, and most likely the third base coach, needs to be somebody that can coach defense. Not just because I think the Braves are awful defensively, but they don't really have anybody right now that is a defensive specialist. And as somebody who loves defense, I would like to see them get somebody that, is more defensive minded. Maybe that means bringing Wash back. I don't know what the future looks like with Wash. Maybe it's better to put him as a bench coach, maybe a little bit more relaxed, not putting him out there in the fire. I don't know. I hate to just retread, but like I said, I don't have a short list of third base coach and bench coaches out there to go to. But EY, Wash, one of those guys in one of those roles, I wouldn't mind that. Like I said, I wouldn't mind having somebody that's more defensive focused. I think you've got your two, more analytically minded guys already, and your younger guys in Hefner and Richardson. I'd be okay now if they wanted to get a more old school guy type of approach for maybe more so the bench role than the third base role. But I'd be okay with that now based on some of the other hires that they already made. Jason Watson says, could Seager be a realistic trade route when you consider he would be two players in filling the shortstop position and the needed bat? So answering the second part of your question, yeah, you get Seager. To me, there's no longer a need to then also get, say Cody Bellinger. You want to do that, great. I'm not going to complain, but that would kill, two birds with one stone if you were to do that. As I've said many times, getting Ha-Seong Kim just fills the shortstop role. It doesn't fill the big bat need. So you would still have to do something, which is crazy. You spend $20 million a year for Ha-Seong Kim, you would hope that's going to be your big bat, but it's not. In his best years, he's an average offensive hitter. So you would still need a big bat, but you go get Corey Seager and you're filling both of those roles. Is it realistic? Here's something to consider with Corey Seager. He is owed $31.5 million for each of the next 6 seasons. He's played in more than 123 games in a season just once since the 2020 season. So obviously 2020 season is short, so that doesn't really count. But since 2021, he's played in more than 123 games just once. Now, when he's out there, he's one of the best players in baseball, but he is getting up there in age. It's somebody that can't stay healthy, and you wonder what that does to him defensively at shortstop. It's a lot of money. And again, it's not a player. Maybe the Rangers are looking to shed some salary, but it's not a player that they're just going to be willing to give up and dump money for. So it's going to cost you, even if they eat some money, it's going to cost you some really good prospects to do so. So I don't know how realistic it actually is. But as CJ Nikowski talked about, followed him on social media, it's at least a phone call that I would make to see what the price is and to at least have some sort of dialogue there in case you do want to come back to it. Next question from Bad News Bars, who says, were the declined options, in your opinion, a sign of bigger signings and wanting better arms in the pen overall, or was it a sign of penny pinching like last year's declined options? So we talked a lot about this yesterday. I don't know. Because of what we faced last year, my inclination is, oh no, they're penny pinching again. But my optimistic view of this offseason, where I said earlier, I think they're going to spend big, I think they're going to go into tax, wants to believe that, okay, they're just setting up to spend big and replace those guys. Again, as I said yesterday, in a good bullpen, Pierce Johnson and Tyler Kinley are your 5th, 6th options in the bullpen. And I didn't really get into this yesterday, but I've said it a lot in the past. Braves spend a lot of money on bullpen arms. And ideally, you're not doing that. Ideally, you have arms coming up that are in your bullpen and they're cheap options. And we've seen other teams do this, but the Braves, for whatever reason, just haven't done a great job of developing and giving those guys chances, really. And it's taken them a long time to transition guys from starters into relievers. They're very hesitant to give up on guys as starters, even though you've seen Max Fried, Spencer Strider, break in as relievers and ultimately become starters. But I think that's really hurt them because they've had to spend a lot of money. You had to spend $16 million on Raisel Iglesias. You trade for him, but obviously you take on that contract. You spent $9 million a year on Joe Jimenez. You spent $7 million a year on Pierce Johnson. You're spending $6-7 million a year on an Aaron Bummer who you don't even use like a high leverage guy. You've had to spend a lot of money on your bullpen. When for, I think, a lot of teams that just don't, spend ridiculous amounts like the Dodgers and Yankees and Mets and those teams, you're hoping your bullpen guys are your cheaper guys. Those should be your cheaper guys. But the Braves have had to commit so much money to the bullpen. And so hopefully this is just a reallocation of resources to sign the shortstop, to sign the starting pitcher, to sign the big bat, and then see what's left for the bullpen. Now, that could put your bullpen in bad shape, and that's certainly a risk. But, again, those are supposed to be your cheaper guys in the bullpen that you're not spending a ton of money on. So I don't know if I quite answered your question there, Bad News, but that's kind of my inclination is, oh no, we saw this last offseason. Here we go again. My optimistic view is maybe they're just reallocating those resources to spend big in other areas that are going to be more expensive. All right, that's just a few of the questions that we have to get to. Man, I only got to 4 questions in the first segment. We'll speed things up here in the next segment. A lot more questions to get to on today's episode. We'll jump back into them here next. The NFL season is here. The NBA season is here, and PrizePicks is the daily fantasy app where making the right call can actually pay off. You and I make decisions every day, but on PrizePicks, being right means cashing in. With football in season, the NBA here, PrizePicks is the simplest and fastest way to get in on the action. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player projections, and you can turn your takes into real prizes. Hawks play on Friday night. You'll open up the PrizePicks app. You'll see they'll have a number there for Jalen Johnson, points plus rebounds. You just pick more or less. It really is that simple. Or you can, the NFL coming up this weekend, trying to think of an NFL player, Bijan Robinson. They'll have a rushing yards total for him. You just pick more or less. It really is that simple. It's all you got to do on 2 to 6 player projections. Also, if you have some issues controlling the way that you game, visit prizepicks.com/help-center/responsible-gaming for tips on how to practice responsible gaming. Download the PrizePicks app today. Use code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONMLB for $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. Thank you as always. Making Locked On Braves your first listen of the day. Go check out Locked On MLB for your second listen of the day. Slowly getting caught up on all the action happening around Major League Baseball. This will be our last episode of this week, unless there is some breaking news, and it is the offseason, so that is certainly possible. But we'll be back next week. I plan to talk more about the bullpen next week and what is the plan there. What are they going to do after declining the options on Kinley and Pierce Johnson? Obviously, have another mailbag episode next week, and any other news that pops up next week as well. So make sure you're subscribed here to Locked On Braves. Thanks for making us your first listen of each and every day. Jumping back into the questions, there's got a lot more to get to on today's episode. The next one from Calvin Fenner, who says, do you think the Braves 2026 payroll will be above or below $250 million? So I think that's a good number to put it at, because I think 2024, correct me if I'm wrong in the comment section, I'll try to look it up real quick, but I believe they were around $240 million. And that's the highest that we've seen the Braves go to. So I think that's a good kind of over-under number to put it at. It's around, the Braves are at 238 in 2024. Their total payroll, not their luxury tax, but their total payroll was $238 million. That's the highest it's ever been. So I think putting it at 250 is a good number. I'm going to say it's below that, but I'm going to say it's between 240 and 250. I think they go above that 238 mark from 2024, but I don't know that they go over the 250 mark. So I would take the under on that, but I think that's a really good number to put it at. Kathy G says, looking at the guys who got qualifying offers, who is worth it, or better, who would AA deem worth it? Does it depend on what happens with Rookie of the Year? Also, do you see Hefner pushing for guys he knows like Severino, Canning, Diaz, or is that a myth? It definitely helps when you have familiarity with a guy. I think it helps from the player side of things. Like if a player, the Braves are interested, let's just say hypothetically, the Braves are interested in Edwin Diaz, and let's say Diaz and Hefner have a great relationship. I don't know that they do, but let's just say that they do have a great relationship, and the money between the Mets and Braves is similar. I think it would, definitely tip the scales maybe a little bit in the Braves' favor. I don't think it's going to be a huge benefit, but again, I think it definitely could help if, there's similar deals on the table. I really like this pitching coach over here with the Braves, so I'm going to go that way. I think it definitely can help, but it's probably not as big a deal. As far as who's worth it for the qualifying offer, and does a lot depend on what happens with Rookie of the Year. I think what happens with the Rookie of the Year does matter. I mean, if you're getting that extra draft pick, then, you don't feel quite as bad. And look, if you're signing somebody who has, they signed Will Smith, who had a qualifying offer attached to him. So look, if he's going to help the team, you don't worry about the qualifying offer. You worry more about the years and the dollars than I think you do the qualifying offer. It's, like if Brandon Woodruff declined, I think he's automatically a no for me. I'm not giving up a draft pick for Brandon Woodruff. if you felt like Bo Bichette could be your long-term shortstop, and I don't know that anybody necessarily thinks he's going to stick there, but let's just say that he was, I wouldn't let the qualifying offer stop me from go getting a really good bat who could also be my future shortstop. So it is just kind of player dependent. And I guess that was the question you're asking. Who do you think is worth it? But again, if they're going to help the team, I'm not too worried about the qualifying offer, but it would obviously help a ton if you got that extra draft pick from Drake Baldwin winning Rookie of the Year. Jake Mastroianni's burner says, could we possibly get the Japanese star that was posted today? And also give me your thoughts on Durkin and how the rest of the season goes. I honestly, my wife wanted me to go to the Auburn game last weekend, and I did not, because mainly I wanted to stay home and watch Game 7 of the World Series. She ended up going with her sister, and it was the worst game imaginable. I didn't watch a second of it because I was watching Game 7. That's how much I don't care about Auburn football right now. As far as the first part of your question about Murakami, he's not coming to the Braves. I mean, it's just not happening. So I wouldn't put much thought into it. Cavs Buckeye says, following up on last week's big bat discussion, what would it take to land Kyle Tucker? Does the fit work with a rotational DH? And could you see a world where they sign both Tucker and extend Acuna? So as far as your last part of that, no, I don't see a world in where they get Kyle Tucker and pay him, which is, going to be a lot. MLB Trade Rumors has him projected to get 11 years, $400 million. I just cannot see a world where, one, that happens, that the Braves do that, or where that happens and they extend Acuna, who's probably going to want something similar. So, no, I don't think you can do both, and I don't think Kyle Tucker is realistic either at that price point. Ecuadorman says, another question with Fletcher being released and the Kelenic trade finally being over, is it the worst trade in Braves history? And if not, what possibly could be? So look, the Jared Kelenic trade is bad, but it's not like they gave up much for him. What they gave up mostly was money, and that's what hurts, or money that you took on that prevented you from doing other things. And that's what mostly hurts, but it's not like they gave up anybody. I think trades that are bad and viewed at some of the worst in Braves history are the trades where you gave up Adam Wainwright, or you gave up a World Series contending team to the Rangers for Mark Teixeira. Those are typically the trades that you look back that are bad. Like the Jared Kelenic trade isn't good in hindsight, but in the moment, it's not like they were giving up much and they were taking a shot on a guy that they could maybe fix. So yeah, it's a bad trade. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think it's anywhere near one of the worst trades in the history. Another one from Ecuadorman says, sorry, one more question. Do you think they hired Weiss because they're going to be cheap again and a new manager would not want to go cheap, and that's why they went safe? I don't think that's the case. Just to answer that simply, no. I think they liked Walt Weiss. You can make the argument, and it's all speculation, and I see the speculation out there. There is no proof of this. You can make the case that this wasn't AA's choice and that AA wanted to go maybe with somebody different outside, maybe somebody a little bit younger, more analytically driven, and that it was, Terry McGurk and those guys who kind of pushed for keeping it in-house with Walt Weiss. You can make that argument, but I don't think it's because the Braves were going cheap and they wanted to say so. I don't believe that at all. Ed Helinski says, is hiring Walt Weiss as a manager a good move? We'll see. I mean, look, we don't know if hiring Danny Lehman would have been a good choice. We don't know if hiring George Lombard or Dave Ross or Mark DeRosa or whoever you wanted. We can all speculate and we can all make assumptions and guesses, but that's all we would be doing. I think with Walt Weiss, the problem a lot of fans have is that he was terrible in Colorado. But what I didn't even realize is that he was coaching high school football when the Rockies gave him that job. It clearly was a guy who wasn't ready for that position. And yet he was given to it in an awful organization in a place that's really hard to win for your first managerial job. And it's been 10 years since then. So I think we do need to give Walt Weiss a little bit of grace, but whether or not it's going to be a good move, nobody really knows. But on the flip side, like I said, nobody really knows if who you wanted would have been a great manager. It just, like, a lot of it's going to come down to the players, I think, more so than Walt Weiss. PJ's Brave says, I read the new pitching coach prefers 6-man rotation. Is that accurate? And if so, do you think that makes acquiring another starting pitching even more important priority? So I have not seen that reported. I have not read that anywhere. I have said on here many times that I would not let I would not let the idea of a 6-man rotation or not having a 6-man rotation. I don't think I'm saying this right. I would not let the idea that you already have 5 starting pitchers keep you from signing another pitcher, is my overall take on this. You sign another pitcher this offseason and you have to go into it and you got 6 guys healthy and ready to go from the jump. That's a good problem to have because you know one of them is going to go down at some point. So whether or not the new pitching coach prefers a 6-man rotation, I have not seen that reported anywhere. But even if that's not the case, I still think it's wise to go get, even if you think you already have 5 guys, I think it's still wise to go get a 6th guy because you never know what's going to happen in spring training. You don't know what's going to happen in April. And it's harder, to get that depth during the season. So go ahead and get it now while you can. Big Dog Fan 73 says, what's the injury report on Jimenez? No, he had a setback, but I think I remember hearing 2026 is in doubt. So I had seen this too and then couldn't find where. So I had to go searching for it. But apparently this came from Alex Anthopoulos on the radio, who said that Joe Jimenez had another scope. But A said they would know more about his status in January, but indicated he might not be ready for the season. He also said in that Ronaldo Lopez was going to be back as a starter. So that's where that came from. It's from Alex Anthopoulos on the radio. So that is a bit concerning. I mean, it doesn't mean he won't be available at all in 2026, but that you would think he would be completely ready for the start of 2026, but that's not the case. So that throws another wrench in the offseason plans because if he's not ready to go or you can't really count on him from the jump and you just cut 2 relievers on pretty modest salaries, then it makes it even more of a head scratcher. All right, we got a lot more questions left to get to on today's episode. We'll take our final break and then we'll get back into them here next. The NBA season is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. Checking out FanDuel.com right now. The Hawks play on Friday night. They play the Raptors in an NBA Cup game. They are favorites in that one, even without Trae Young. So you can check all that out at FanDuel.com. They got parlay builders in there, streaks, raining buckets, each team to score 20 plus points in the first quarter between a specific matchup. You can see all that right there in FanDuel.com or at FanDuel.com. Also, make sure you visit FanDuel.com/play-safe for tools and resources to help you stay in control of the way you play. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, jump right back into the questions here, see if we can get through the rest of them. Mets Dispatch says, how on earth will Gwinnett Stripers replace David Fletcher's unreal clubhouse vibes and jokes? It's irreplaceable. Hey, nothing that says the Braves can't bring him back on a minor league deal. I mean, he hasn't been suspended from baseball or anything, so nothing to say the Braves couldn't bring him back. Dustin Mount says, does Ranger Suarez being given the qualifying offer take him off the possibility list for you? And were you surprised by any of the players given or not given the qualifying offer? The only one I was surprised was with Brandon Woodruff. And just because it's the Brewers, and that's $22 million a year for a guy. I would imagine he'd be their highest paid player on average annual value. So I was surprised by that one, and the fact that he ended the season injured after being injured and out all the previous season. So that one did surprise me. Nobody else really surprised me. As I said earlier, like you can sign somebody that's going to help your team in a big way, like I think Ranger Suarez would. I don't care about that qualifying offer. Again, it does ease it a little bit if you get that extra pick, but yeah, I mean, I would still go after pretty much anybody on that list other than maybe Brandon Woodruff. Kane Suttle says, would your ideal bench coach be someone like Wash, Cranny, or someone more analytical? Also say we get Bellinger. Does he play left field more than Profar? And Profar be more of a floater DH? So yes, to your second question, you get Belly, who's a good defender. He's playing in the field pretty much every day, and you just move Profar around. As far as the ideal bench coach, I kind of touched on this earlier. I would like somebody who can coach defense. Obviously, Wash can do that. And I don't necessarily need somebody that's more analytical. I think you got that in Hefner already, and your pitching coach. You already have your analytical department in the front office that's doing all that. I guess the way that I would prefer it, you get a third base coach who can coach the defense, whether that's Wash or somebody else, and your bench coach is somebody that maybe is a little bit more analytically minded, that maybe they have the data during the game and they're feeding it to Walt, during the game, real time, giving him that info so that you kind of have the more old school mentality. And Weiss, who he said he's going to, certainly use the data that he's given, but to have somebody, that's more in tune with that data and how to read it and how to quantify it and be able to give that to Walt in real time is probably what I would prefer in these coaches. Matt H says, which of the holes we have do you think would be best filled by trade? As in, you don't think there's good value in free agency and much better value for trades? Good question here. So looking at the holes of, shortstop, big bat, relief pitcher, starting pitcher, there's good values in both the free agent market and in trades. So definitely be able to have one. I think it would probably be the big bat, just because if you don't get Kyle Tucker, you don't get Cody Bellinger, probably not getting Pete Alonso, probably not getting Kyle Schwarber. There's not really that ideal big bat out there. So I think trades if you're going to get that big bat, I think trade is the most likely route to go for that. Kaz Buckeye says, if the Braves don't significantly spend and or add this offseason, especially after decisions yesterday, do we start to view this front office ownership group as less of one trying to be the best in the business and more like one using the Milwaukee bites at the apple philosophy? So if they don't spend big this offseason, the payroll doesn't get a 250. Forget the luxury tax, because like I said, the team payroll could be higher than the luxury tax. So, push that aside. They don't get back to that 240 team payroll number that they had in 2024 this offseason. I'm going to see that as a sign of this front office ownership being cheap. And look, I've said in the past, you can't call a team cheap that's still top 10 in payroll, but we know what they're making and we know what their revenues are. And if they're not going to, reinvest that money into a team to help build a winner, then I think it's right to call them cheap. So they don't get back to that 240, 250 team payroll. I think it is certainly warranted for fans to feel like the ownership group is letting us down. Hayden Harris says, is there any thought to teams not spending this offseason in fear of missing 2027? Look, I know I've tried to answer this question many times, and I just don't know. We don't know. It's going to be something we're going to have to look back in hindsight and see, or in real time, as we see this offseason kind of play out and how teams are going to handle it. I still think you go into it with the idea that 2027 is going to be there, and you act like that. But I'm sure there's going to be, some maneuvering, maybe some hesitation on players, maybe players that say, I want to get it locked up through the season and beyond, so I have that guaranteed money no matter what happens. Because you're a player, and let's say you sign a 1-year deal, and then the next season, gets canceled or delayed. That's a bit scary. Then coming back after that, you don't have a contract, going into that 2027 season or into that. I don't think they're going to miss the entire 2020 season. I really hope not, but it's really hard to tell right now until we kind of see it play out. Dr. MJF says, what about Michael King? Any chance the Braves might consider him? Yeah, I think they would. He did get the qualifying offer, but again, I love Michael King. I know he's had trouble staying healthy, which would possibly make me shy away from him a little bit more with that qualifying offer, but I think he's a really good pitcher and definitely somebody the Braves should be considering. But because of his injury history, that is another one that I could see with that qualifying offer attached. And for King too, maybe he just takes that at $22 million, looks to have a healthier year, and then, test free agency next year where he won't have that qualifying offer. Waldrop Splitter, give us your dream offseason. No need to be realistic, just your absolute best ideas for the Braves this offseason. So I kind of gave that beginning of last week. You want to go back and check out that episode, but I believe it was Ha-Seong Kim at shortstop, Zach Gallen at pitcher, Cody Bellinger for your big bat, and then Raisel Iglesias and Gregory Soto as your relievers. Now that Robert Suarez didn't get a qualifying offer, I'd be all in on Robert Suarez too. You get Robert Suarez and Raisel Iglesias, I think that would be fantastic. Give you two kind of closer options there. But that's what my dream offseason would look like right now. Jason Watson says, Gray, Donovan, Lopez, Buxton, Castillo, Crawford. Which trade would you like the most, and which would your hypothetical return be? If I had to rank those, Lopez, Buxton is the easy top choice for me. I really like Pablo Lopez. Obviously, Buxton gives you that big bat, a backup in center field for Michael Harris. So that would definitely be the the first one for me. That one's going to cost you a lot. Then it would be Castillo and Crawford. Then it would be Gray and Donovan. I mean, Donovan's a bench guy. He's not playing shortstop for you. Gray costs a lot of money. They're going to have to eat a good chunk of that. So Lopez Buxton's the easy choice there for me. But it would be a pretty big package for both of those guys. Big Dog Fan 73 says, do you think it would be a better move to trade for an unproven Jordan Lawler in years of control and give up prospect capital, or potentially overpay for an often injured Kim and keep our prospects? That's a good question. I don't know. That's a tough one. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. I did not read this one fully beforehand. To get an unproven Jordan Lawler who could have years of control at, look, I'm going to say Jordan Lawler. I'm going to say I would rather trade for Jordan Lawler than overpay for Ha-Seong Kim. And here's why, is because, as I said earlier, getting Kim still does not give you that big bat. But trading for Lawler gives you that potential shortstop, future shortstop that's cheap. And it also frees up money that you didn't have to spend on Kim to then go get Cody Bellinger or go trade for Byron Buxton or whoever. So I think that's ultimately what I would do. If those were my two options, I think I'd rather trade for Lawler, hope that he sticks, that prospect status comes to fruition, and use those savings to then, if you're not going to use those savings to go out and get a big bat, then I'd probably say Kim. Go ahead and get the more proven guy. But if it were me and I'm GM and I'm going to use that money to then go invest in a big bat, then yeah, I'm doing the Lawler move. David says, do the Braves give Baldwin the Acuna-Harris Strider contract and sign him long-term now? I don't think they do it now, just because you don't need to. And we've seen how some of those deals haven't necessarily looked great in the end. So I don't think they do it now. I mean, he's still in pre-arb, so there's not really that need to. Plus, you're already paying Sean Murphy $15 million. So I don't think there's a need to do it right now. Jacob Cole says, I live 2 hours from Dallas. Most of my friends are Rangers fans. When I bring up the idea of us trading for Seager, they look at me like I'm crazy. Do you think the Rangers even look to trade him? I don't know the Rangers situation necessarily financially. It sounds like they would like to get rid of some money. And I'm sure they're probably a little bit frustrated with the fact that Seager's never there. I'm not going to say never there, but he's often injured. I think if they could get out from under that money, they would. But I also don't think it's one that they're going to just be shopping him and waving him to everybody, say, hey, come take Corey Seager. So again, I think it's one where they would listen, but I don't think it's one that they're necessarily shopping him. Last one here, Mike Book says, what do you think of the Braves trading for Katel Marte and moving Ozzie to DH? I love that. If you can go get the best second baseman in baseball, it was a plus bat. Yeah, I definitely do that. But I think that's probably a little bit unrealistic unless there is just some conflict there with, I know it was reported during the season between Marte and the Diamondbacks, but yeah, you go get Katel Marte. Not only is he the best second baseman, he's one of the best hitters in baseball, switch hitter, all that, good defender. Yeah, absolutely. You go get Katel Marte and move Ozzie to DH or whatever you need to do at that point. I absolutely would. All right, thanks so much for your questions. I believe I got to all of them. If I missed them, I apologize, but we ended up with 27 submitted today. Thanks so much for being here with me live as well. Rex Green, Ecuadorman, PJ's Braves, King of Fleas. Rex Green says Lindsay's the one that says Hefner preferred the 6-man rotation. So I'm certainly not going to question Lindsay there on that. I just haven't read it or heard it myself, as I haven't had a chance to listen or read Lindsay's podcast yet. But again, for me, that was great if it is, because I think the Braves definitely should do that. Jordan Overstreet, join me, One Wolf, King of Fleas in here as well. Video Moon and Everyday are in here. Thank you so much for joining me here live. Make sure you hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Hit that like button. Leave me a comment down below. Make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe to the Locked On Braves podcast wherever you get your podcast. We will talk to you next time.